The woman who had trained more combat killers than anyone in naval special warfare history was currently arguing with a 22-year-old about expired coupons. Corinne Vesquilla stood at the Navy exchange register, her basket containing laundry detergent and a birthday card, while the young cashier insisted her 10% off coupon had expired yesterday. Behind her, a line was forming. She could feel the impatience radiating from the petty officer, second class, checking his watch. Some battles were not worth fighting. She paid full price. Before we continue with what happens next, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. Maybe you know someone whose true capabilities remain hidden beneath an ordinary surface. Outside the NEX, the December sun warmed her face as she walked toward her car. 52 years old, 28 years in the Navy. 15 of those years spent in rooms where she taught young men how to survive the unsurvivable. And now here she was, fighting about coupons and planning what to make for dinner. She preferred it this way. The quiet was something she had earned. A young woman sat on the bench near the parking lot, clutching a folder of paperwork and looking like she might cry. Corinne recognized the expression. New military spouse. Overwhelmed by the maze of base bureaucracy that made no sense to anyone who had not spent years navigating it. She should keep walking. She had groceries that needed refrigeration. She had a dozen small tasks waiting at home. But some instincts ran deeper than convenience. Corinne sat down beside her. The young woman looked up, startled, then embarrassed. "I am sorry," she said, wiping her eyes. "I am fine. I just cannot figure out where housing wants me to go next, and my husband deployed 3 days after he got here, and I do not know anyone." "What is your name?" "Maya. Maya Thornton." Corinne took the folder gently from her hands and flipped through the pages. Standard housing application. 3 forms that asked for the same information in slightly different ways. A signature block that referenced a form Maya clearly did not have. "They gave you the wrong packet," Corinne said. "This is for officer housing. Your husband is enlisted." "Yes?" Maya nodded miserably. "Come with me." 20 minutes later, Maya had the correct forms, a clear list of next steps, and the phone number for the spouse support coordinator. She also had an invitation to coffee next week because Corinne remembered what it felt like to be alone in a new place. "Thank you," Maya said. "I do not even know your name." "Corinne, and you'll be fine. This part is the hardest part. It gets easier." She watched the young woman walk away with something closer to hope in her posture. Small kindnesses. That was what retirement was supposed to be. Small kindnesses and quiet days, and no more teaching young people how to kill. The drive home took her through the familiar streets of Coronado, past the Silver Strand training beaches where she had spent so many years, past the BUD/S compound where the next generation was currently suffering through Hell Week. She had not looked too long. Looking too long brought back too much. Her house was modest by civilian standards, comfortable by military ones. Base housing for a captain, which meant her husband Kwame outranked her address. She did not mind. She had never cared about rank, only about whether the job got done. Kwame was home early, which surprised her. He stood in the kitchen in civilian clothes, his tall frame bent over the stove, stirring something that smelled like the jollof rice his mother had taught him to make 30 years ago. "You're home," she said. He turned and smiled at her. The same smile that had convinced her to marry him 19 years ago. Meeting ended early. "I thought I would start dinner." She set down her bags and moved into his arms. He held her the way he always did, solid and warm and present. 19 years, and she still felt safe here. That was not nothing. That was everything. They ate dinner on the back patio, watching the last light fade over the Pacific. Tomorrow is Saturday, the Navy Special Warfare Foundation Gala. She had been dreading it for weeks. "You do not have to go," Kwame said, reading her silence the way he always could. "If crowds still bother you, I want to support the foundation. They do good work." He was quiet for a moment. "That was not what I asked." She looked at the ocean. The truth was complicated. Crowds did not bother her. What bothered her was the way people looked at her when they knew who she was. The reverence, the questions, the way they wanted to touch something she had spent 3 years trying to leave behind. And what bothered her more was the alternative. The events where no one knew her, where she was just a captain's wife, invisible in a different way. "I will be fine," she said. "One night. Smile and nod, and we will be home by 10. Her phone buzzed against the patio table, a number she had not seen in 3 years. She picked it up and read the message. "Heard you are coming tomorrow. Been a long time, instructor. Some of the young ones do not believe you are real. Ghost. Vincent Tarasenko, one of her first students. One of the best operators to ever come through her program. A man who had lost his son to the same war she had trained him for." She stared at the message for a long moment. Then she typed back a single word. "Good." Kwame watched her set the phone down. He did not ask who it was. After 19 years, he knew when to give her space. "Tomorrow night," she said quietly. One night, and then back to normal. But even as she said it, she felt something stirring. Something she had tried to bury under 3 years of quiet days and small kindnesses. The part of her that had never really retired. The part that knew normal was just another word for waiting. The ocean was dark now, and somewhere out there, young men were learning to survive things that would break most people. She had taught hundreds of them. She had lost some of them. And tomorrow, she would walk into a room full of people who either did not know what she had done or could not stop thanking her for it. Neither option felt right, but she had stopped expecting things to feel right a long time ago. The Silver Strand Club had been decorated to impress donors who had never seen combat and operators who had seen too much. Crystal chandeliers cast soft light over tables draped in navy blue. A string quartet played something classical in the corner. Through the tall windows, the Pacific Ocean stretched dark and endless toward the horizon. Corinne adjusted the strap of her simple navy dress and reminded herself to breathe. Beside her, Kwame looked distinguished in his dress blues, the gold oak leaves on his shoulders catching the light. He belonged in rooms like this. She had spent her career avoiding them. They moved through the crowd together. Kwame knew everyone, shaking hands with admirals and joking with commanders. Corinne stayed at his side, smiling when introduced, offering nothing more than her first name. "And this is my wife, Corinne," Kwame said to a rear admiral whose name she immediately forgot. "Lovely to meet you," the admiral said, his eyes already sliding past her toward someone more important. "Are you involved with the foundation?" "Just here to support my husband," she said. The admiral nodded and moved on. She felt Kwame's hand squeeze hers gently. He understood. He always understood. They found their table near the back, which suited her fine. The further from the spotlight, the better. She scanned the room out of habit, noting the exits, the security positions, the sight lines. Old instincts that refused to die. A waiter passed with champagne. She took sparkling water instead. The room was filling now. Active duty SEALs in dress uniforms, heavy with ribbons. Their wives in cocktail dresses, some comfortable in this world, others looking as lost as Maya had looked yesterday. Retired operators with gray in their beards and stories in their eyes. Civilian donors who wrote large checks and wanted to feel connected to something larger than themselves. And then there was the loud table near the bar. She heard them before she saw them. A group of younger operators, maybe 8 or 9 of them, clustered around a man who was holding court like he owned the room. His laugh cut through the string quartet. His voice carried across conversations that had nothing to do with him. Senior Chief Petty Officer, she noted from his insignia. Maybe 35, the kind of build that came from obsessive training and protein supplements. He moved like someone who expected people to get out of his way. Kwame followed her gaze. "Bryce Kellerman," he said quietly. "Team 7. Good operator, from what I hear. Bad reputation for everything else." She watched Kellerman put his hand on a young petty officer's shoulder, squeezing too hard while making a joke at his expense. The younger man laughed along, because what else could he do? The power dynamics were invisible to civilians, but clear as day to anyone who had lived in this world. A server approached Kellerman's table. Young woman, maybe 22. Kellerman said something to her that made his buddies laugh. The server's smile went rigid, and she hurried away. Corinne felt the old anger stir. Men like Kellerman were a virus in the community. They confused aggression with strength and cruelty with leadership. She had spent 15 years trying to train that sickness out of young operators. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes the sickness was too deep. A hand touched her elbow. She turned to find a face she had not seen in 3 years. Ghost Tarasenko looked older, more gray in his beard, more weight in his eyes. But his posture was still perfect, and his grip when he shook her hand was still iron. "Master Chief," he said. "Or should I say, ma'am?" "Vincent." She allowed herself a small smile. "You look terrible. You look exactly the same. It is irritating." A young lieutenant nearby glanced over at the exchange, confused by the deference in Ghost's voice. This weathered old contractor treating a captain's wife like she was someone important. Ghost noticed the look, and his expression flickered with amusement. He leaned closer to Corinne. "They really do not know who you are, do they? That is the idea. Shame. Some of these young ones could use a lesson in humility." Across the room, Kellerman's laugh erupted again. Ghost's jaw tightened. Corinne saw the history in his reaction. There was something personal there. "You know him?" she said. "I know his type." Ghost's voice was flat, loud, arrogant. Thinks his deployment count makes him untouchable. He is an instructor now. At Bud S. Corinne felt something cold settle in her stomach. Men like Kellerman teaching the next generation, passing on their sickness like a genetic disease. She looked away from Kellerman's table, and her eyes found someone else. A woman in dress whites, lieutenant commander insignia on her shoulders. Dark hair pulled back, Middle Eastern features, moving through the crowd with the quiet confidence of someone who had earned her place in rooms where people doubted she belonged. Lieutenant Commander Dara Amadi, one of the first female SEALs, one of Corinne's last students before retirement. Amadi had not seen her yet. Corinne was not sure if she wanted to be seen. Every reunion meant explanations. Every explanation meant becoming visible again. She turned back to Ghost. "How was the consulting work?" "Pays the bills. Keeps me busy." He paused. "Keeps me from thinking too much." She understood. After what he had lost, thinking too much was dangerous. A young SEAL approached their table, ribbons gleaming on his chest. One ribbon in particular caught her eye. She knew that ribbon. She had attended the ceremony where they created it, honoring a mission that officially never happened. Her hand moved without thinking, touching her own chest where an identical ribbon would sit if she were in uniform. Ghost saw the gesture. His expression softened with understanding. "Corinne," Kwame said gently, "are you all right?" She lowered her hand. "Fine. Just remembering." The string quartet shifted to something more upbeat. The crowd was getting louder, lubricated by open bar generosity. Kellerman's table had grown louder still, his voice rising above the music. She watched him corner a young petty officer's wife near the bar, standing too close, ignoring the way she leaned back. Her husband was across the room, oblivious or afraid to intervene. The young woman's eyes were darting, looking for escape, looking for anyone who might help. Kwame was deep in conversation with an admiral. Ghost had drifted toward the bar. The young woman was alone with a predator who wore his uniform like a hunting license. Corinne set down her sparkling water. Some instincts never truly retired. Some lessons never stopped demanding to be taught. And some men never learned until someone taught them the hard way. She moved through the crowd, her path unhurried but direct. The young woman saw her coming, and something like hope flickered in her eyes. Kellerman did not notice. He was too busy enjoying his own voice, his own proximity, his own power. He was about to learn that power was not what he thought it was. Corinne reached the young woman and touched her arm gently. "There you are," she said warmly. "I have been looking everywhere for you. The Admiral's wife wanted to meet you." The young woman blinked, confused but grateful. She allowed herself to be guided away from Kellerman, who stood there with his drink halfway to his mouth and irritation flashing across his face. "Thank you," the young woman whispered as they moved toward the crowd. "I did not know how to get away." "You do not have to explain." Corinne squeezed her arm. "Find your husband. Stay close to him for the rest of the night." The young woman nodded and disappeared into the crowd. Corinne turned to head back to her table. Kellerman was standing in her path. He was bigger up close. 6'2", maybe 6'3", the kind of chest that came from hours under a barbell. His dress uniform fit him like it was tailored by someone who understood that intimidation was part of the design. That was rude, he said. We were having a conversation. She was uncomfortable. Corinne kept her voice neutral. I gave her an exit. No harm done. Kellerman's eyes narrowed. He was not used to being managed. Not used to women who did not shrink when he stepped closer. Who are you? Corinne. I am here with my husband. Corinne who? Just Corinne. She smiled politely. Enjoy your evening, Senior Chief. She moved to step around him. He shifted to block her path. Not aggressively. Just enough to make clear that he decided when conversations ended. I have not seen you before, he said. Whose wife are you? Captain Oduya. Surface warfare. Kellerman's lip curled slightly. A ship driver. So you are a surface spouse playing dress-up at a special warfare event. The Foundation supports all branches. She kept her voice even. My husband and I are happy to contribute. Behind Kellerman, his group had noticed the exchange. A female chief petty officer with a smirk on her face. Two younger operators watching with the nervous energy of men who knew their senior chief was about to make someone uncomfortable. Kellerman leaned closer. His breath carried whiskey and entitlement. You know what I think? I think you do not belong here. I think you are one of those dependas who likes to feel important by associating with real warriors. Corinne felt her pulse stay steady. 28 years of training did not disappear because someone used ugly words. She had been called worse by better men in harder places. I'm sorry you feel that way, she said. Excuse me. She stepped left. He stepped left. She stepped right. He stepped right. The dance of a man who wanted her to know she was trapped. The female chief laughed. Careful, Bryce. She is getting feisty. Corinne calculated. She could end this in 2 seconds. A wrist lock, a pressure point, a joint manipulation that would put him on the ground before he understood what happened. But the consequences would follow her home. Assault charges. Headlines. Kwame's career complicated by his wife's actions. She chose words instead. Senior Chief Kellerman. She let his name land with precision. I understand you are having a good time with your friends. I'm asking politely for you to let me pass. This does not need to become a situation. Something flickered in his eyes. Not fear. Curiosity. Most people did not say his name with that particular weight. Most people did not meet his stare without flinching. How do you know my name? Your reputation precedes you. His friends laughed, assuming it was a compliment. Kellerman was not so sure. He studied her face, looking for the joke, looking for the weakness. Across the room, Kwame had noticed his wife was missing. He was scanning the crowd. Ghost had also turned from a bar, his operator's instincts picking up the tension from 30 feet away. Kellerman saw her glance toward them. You expecting backup? He smiled. What is your captain husband going to do? Write me a stern memo? The chief behind him laughed again. The younger operators shifted uncomfortably. One of them, a petty officer first class with troubled eyes, looked like he wanted to be anywhere else. Corinne made one final attempt. I'm going to walk away now. I suggest you let me. For your sake, not mine. Kellerman's expression hardened. There it was. The moment she had seen 100 times in training. The moment when ego overrode judgment. When pride demanded dominance regardless of cost. For my sake. He laughed. Lady, I have been in firefights with Taliban. I have cleared buildings in Mosul. You think I'm scared of some captain's wife? She did not answer. There was nothing left to say. She had given him every exit. He had refused them all. Kwame was moving through the crowd now, his face tight with concern. Ghost was paralleling him from the other direction. Lieutenant Commander Amadi had noticed the commotion and was pushing toward them. But none of them would reach her in time. Kellerman stepped closer still. Close enough that she could count the ribbons on his chest. Close enough to smell the aggression coming off him like heat. You need to learn your place, he said quietly. And then his hand came up. His fingers closed around the strap of her dress. Not pulling. Not yet. Just holding. Just demonstrating that he could do whatever he wanted, whenever he wanted, to whoever he wanted. The room had gone quiet around them. People were watching now. The string quartet played on, oblivious, but conversations had died. Someone gasped. Corinne looked at his hand on her strap. Then she looked at his face. For the first time that evening, she smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. It was the smile she had worn in training rooms when a young operator thought size and strength were enough. The smile that preceded lessons no one ever forgot. "You have made a mistake," she said softly, "but you do not know it yet." What happened next took less than 2 seconds. Corinne's hand moved in a motion so economical that most people in the room missed it entirely. She did not strike him. She did not hurt him. She simply rotated her wrist against his thumb, applied pressure to a point on the back of his hand, and stepped offline from his center of gravity. Kellerman's grip on her strap vanished. His arm extended at an angle that gave her complete control of his balance. One small shift, and he would be on the floor. One twist, and his wrist would be broken. She did neither. She held him there for exactly long enough to make her point. Then she released him and stepped back. Kellerman stumbled, catching himself on a nearby table. Glasses rattled. Someone's wine spilled across the white tablecloth. The string quartet finally stopped playing. The room was frozen. 200 people staring at a 52-year-old woman in a cocktail dress who had just controlled a combat-decorated SEAL like he was a first-day recruit. Kellerman straightened, his face flushing red. His friends had gone silent. The female chief's smirk had disappeared entirely. The young petty officer with the troubled eyes looked like he might be sick. "What the hell was that?" Kellerman breathed. "That was me asking you not to touch me." Curran's voice carried across the silent room. "You should have listened." Kellerman's hands clenched into fists. He stepped toward her again, and this time there was violence in his posture, real violence, the kind that ended with someone bleeding on the floor. A voice cut through the tension like a blade. "That is enough, Senior Chief." Ghost Tarasenko had materialized beside Corinne. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of a man who had ended lives in rooms darker than this one. "Stay out of this, old man." Kellerman did not take his eyes off Corinne. "This does not concern you. It concerns everyone in this room." Ghost stepped forward, placing himself between Kellerman and Corinne. "You just put your hands on Master Chief Vasquez Aduya. She ran advanced combat training for 15 years. She trained me. She probably trained whoever trained you." The words rippled through the crowd. Corinne heard whispers, saw heads turning, saw recognition dawning on faces that had looked right through her all evening. Kellerman's expression shifted. Not fear, not yet, but uncertainty, the first crack in his armor. "I do not care who she is," he said, but his voice had lost some of its edge. "She had no right to put her hands on me. You grabbed her first." Ghost's voice was ice. Every person in this room saw it. Every person in this room saw her give you chance after chance to walk away. You chose this. Lieutenant Commander Amati pushed through the crowd and stopped short when she saw Corinne. Her face cycled through shock, recognition, and something that looked like protective fury. "Master Chief?" Her voice cracked slightly. "What happened?" "A misunderstanding." Corinne kept her voice calm. "The Senior Chief had too much to drink. It is being handled. Like hell it is being handled." Kellerman's voice rose. "She assaulted me. I want her arrested." A murmur ran through the crowd. Some looks of disbelief. Some of confusion. A few, mostly from men clustered near Kellerman, of support for his version of events. Kwame finally reached them. His face was controlled, but his eyes were hot with anger. He positioned himself beside his wife, not in front of her. After 19 years, he knew better than to suggest she needed protection. "Captain Oduya," Kellerman sneered. "Perfect. You gonna let your wife fight your battles?" "She does not need me to fight anything." Kwame's voice was steady. "But I am happy to provide a witness statement when Shore Patrol arrives." "Shore Patrol?" Kellerman laughed. "For what? Some retired paper pusher who got lucky with a wrist grab?" The young petty officer behind Kellerman finally spoke. His voice was quiet, but it cut through the noise. "Senior Chief, there is a photographer for the Foundation event. He has been taking pictures all night." Kellerman went still. Corinne had noticed the photographer earlier, a civilian contractor with a high-end camera documenting the gala for the Foundation's website. He had been capturing candid moments all evening. He had certainly captured this one. The calculus in Kellerman's eyes was almost visible. Assault charges meant his word against hers. Video evidence meant the end of his career. The truth was now a matter of public record, preserved in high resolution. Commander Elias Wentworth pushed through the crowd. Current commanding officer of Naval Special Warfare Advanced Training Command. Corinne had never met him, but she knew his reputation. Fair, thorough, intolerant of misconduct. Someone want to tell me what happened here? His voice left no room for evasion. Several people started talking at once. Wentworth held up a hand, and the noise stopped. One at a time. He looked at Corinne. Mom, you first. Corinne gave a clear, factual account. No embellishment, no emotion, just the sequence of events as they had occurred. She had helped another woman leave an uncomfortable conversation. Kellerman had blocked her path. She had asked to leave multiple times. He had grabbed her dress. She had removed his hand without injuring him. Wentworth listened without expression. Then he turned to Kellerman. Senior Chief, your version. Kellerman hesitated. The photographer was still in the room. The witnesses were still watching. The lie he wanted to tell would not survive the evidence. This is not over, he said finally. His eyes locked on Corinne. I do not care what you used to be. You do not embarrass me like this and walk away. Corinne met his stare without blinking. The anger in his eyes was familiar. She had seen it in 100 training rooms. The rage of a man who had just discovered he was far smaller than he believed. 2 shore patrol officers entered through the main doors. Wentworth gestured them over and began speaking quietly. Ghost leaned close to Corinne. You could have broken his arm. I know. Why did you not? Because that is not who I am anymore. She paused, and because he does not deserve the excuse. Across the room, Kellerman was watching her. Waiting, planning. This is not over, she thought. He would not let it be. Men like him never did. But for the first time in 3 years, she found that she did not mind. The side room smelled like stale coffee and bureaucratic tension. Corinne sat in a folding chair beneath fluorescent lights that buzzed faintly overhead. The elegance of the gala felt very far away. Commander Wentworth stood near the door, reviewing notes on a tablet. 2 shore patrol officers had taken statements in separate rooms. Kellerman was somewhere down the hall, presumably spinning whatever version of events he thought would save him. Kwame sat beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. He had not spoken much since they left the ballroom. She could feel his anger like heat radiating from a stove. The door opened, and Wentworth looked up. A junior officer entered and handed him a tablet. The commander studied the screen for a long moment. His expression did not change, but something in his posture shifted. The photographer's footage, he said. It is clear. Corinne nodded. She had expected nothing less. Wentworth set down the tablet and looked at her directly for the first time. Master Chief Vasquez-Adia, I have heard your name more times than I can count. Your training protocols are still the foundation of everything we do at Advanced Combat Training. I am retired, Commander. Retired does not mean forgotten. He paused. I need to ask, do you want to press charges? Corinne considered the question. Pressing charges would mean hearings. Testimony. Her name in reports that would circulate through the community. 3 years of carefully constructed privacy gone. What happens if I do not? Wentworth's jaw tightened. Administrative action. Counseling. Possibly a letter of reprimand. He would remain in his current position. As an instructor. Yes. The word hung in the air. Kellerman would keep teaching. Keep shaping young operators. Keep passing his sickness to the next generation. And if I do press charges? Court-martial proceedings. His career would effectively be over. But it would take time. Months, possibly. And he would fight it. Kwame spoke for the first time. He put his hands on her. In front of 200 witnesses. How is this even a question? Wentworth looked at him with something like sympathy. Captain, I understand your frustration. But the senior chief has 12 years of service, 3 combat deployments, and a Silver Star. His defense will argue that the contact was minimal, that your wife's response was disproportionate, that she is a trained combat instructor who overreacted to a minor incident. Corinne almost laughed. A minor incident. A man twice her size grabbing her dress to demonstrate dominance. And it would be framed as minor. I need to think about it, she said. Wentworth nodded. Take the night. But I should tell you, there's another complication. He handed her his phone. On the screen was a post from an online forum. Private Operators Community. Kellerman's words glowed in the dim light. Some retired desk jockey embarrassed me tonight with a sucker move at the Foundation Gala. Claims she used to be an instructor. Probably pushed papers while real operators did the work. I would bet my career she could not demonstrate a single real skill in a fair fight. Corinne read it twice. The comments underneath were a mix of support for Kellerman and skepticism from older operators who seemed to recognize her name. This was posted 20 minutes ago, Wentworth said. It has already been screenshot and shared to every special warfare group chat I know of. By morning, it will be everywhere. Kwame took the phone and read it. His face went rigid. He is calling her out. Publicly. After what he did. He is protecting his ego, Wentworth said. If he can frame this as her fault, he controls the narrative. Corinne stood and walked to the window. Outside, the parking lot was quiet. Somewhere beyond it, the Pacific Ocean rolled against the shore, indifferent to the small dramas of human pride. She had spent 3 years building a quiet life. 3 years learning to be something other than what the Navy had made her. 3 years trying to forget the weight of all those young faces, the ones who came back changed, and the ones who did not come back at all. And now this man, this arrogant, mediocre man, was trying to drag her back into the arena, trying to make her prove something she had proven 1,000 times before. The door opened behind her. She turned to find Ghost standing in the doorway, his face unreadable. "You saw the post," she said. Everyone saw the post. He stepped into the room. The community is divided. Half of them know exactly who you are. The other half think Kellerman is telling the truth. Let them think what they want. Ghost shook his head. It is not that simple. He is an instructor, Corinne, at Bud S. Every candidate who passes through his hands will learn from a man who thinks he can put his hands on whoever he wants and lies way out of it. Is that the legacy you want for the program you built? She turned back to the window. Her reflection stared back at her, older than she remembered, tired in ways that sleep could not fix. Kwame came to stand beside her. "You do not have to do anything," he said quietly. "We can go home. Let the system handle it. The system will give him a slap on the wrist and send him back to the classroom." She heard the bitterness in her own voice. "That is what the system does. Then do not let it." Ghost's voice was hard. "You taught me that silence is consent. That letting bad behavior slide is the same as endorsing it." Were those just words? She closed her eyes. The faces came back. Hundreds of them. Young men who had trusted her to prepare them for the worst moments of their lives. Some of them had died using the skills she taught. Some of them had survived because of those same skills. And somewhere out there, Kellerman was teaching the next generation that power meant taking whatever you wanted from whoever could not stop you. She opened her eyes. "I am not going to press charges," she said. Kwame started to speak, but she held up her hand. "I'm not going to press charges because that is not enough." She turned to face Wentworth. He made this public. He challenged my qualifications in front of the entire community. If I let that stand, every operator who ever trained under me will wonder if he was right. "What are you suggesting?" Wentworth asked. "I am suggesting we settle this the way SEALs have always settled things." She met his eyes, on the grinder, in front of everyone. Let him prove his claims or choke on them. The morning sun cut through the blinds of their kitchen as Corinne sat at the table with coffee she had not touched. Her phone had been buzzing since dawn. She had stopped looking at it an hour ago. Kwame moved around the kitchen in silence, making breakfast neither of them would eat. The normalcy of the routine felt absurd against the weight of what was coming. A knock at the door broke the quiet. Ghost stood on their porch, older in the daylight than he had seen the night before. Behind him, Lieutenant Commander Amadi waited with a folder tucked under her arm. Corinne stepped aside to let them in. They gathered in the living room. For people bound together by a world most civilians would never understand. Ghost lowered himself into the armchair by the window. Amadi perched on the edge of the couch, her posture still military perfect after all these years. "The post went viral," Amadi said. "Every special warfare group chat, every veteran forum, even some civilian military pages picked it up. I figured." Ghost leaned forward. "But something else happened too. The old guard started pushing back. Operators who train under you. They're defending you in the comments, sharing stories. Someone dug up a training video from 9 years ago. What video? Amadi pulled out her phone and handed it over. On the screen, a younger Corinne ran the confidence course at Advanced Combat Training. 53 years old in the footage, keeping pace with operators half her age, finishing ahead of most of them. Corinne watched herself navigate obstacles she had designed, demonstrating techniques she had perfected over decades. A ghost from a life she had tried to leave behind. The comments are a war zone, Ghost said. Half the community thinks Kellerman is about to get destroyed. The other half thinks he is going to expose you as a fraud. Let them think what they want. Ghost shook his head. This is bigger than what people think. He is an instructor. If he survives this with his reputation intact, he wins. He goes back to teaching, and every young operator learns that men like him face no consequences. Corinne set down the phone. She looked at Amadi, really looked at her for the first time since they arrived. The young lieutenant she had trained 6 years ago was gone. In her place sat a combat veteran, one of the first women to earn the SEAL Trident, tempered by deployments and loss. Why are you here, Dara? Amadi's composure flickered. Because you saved my life. I trained you. That is not the same thing. It is exactly the same thing. Amadi's voice hardened. Syria, 2019. We were pinned in a building with no extraction for 6 hours. I used everything you taught me. The breathing techniques, the corner clearing, the way you showed us to conserve ammunition and wait for the right shot. She paused. 3 of us walked out of that building. We walked out because of you. The room went quiet. Corinne felt the weight of the words settle into her chest, mixing with the weight she already carried. Ghost spoke into the silence. My son trained under you too. Corinne closed her eyes. She knew what was coming. He did not make it back from his 3rd deployment. Ghost's voice was steady, but she could hear the fractures underneath. But he saved 4 men before he went down. He used the techniques you taught him to hold a position that should have been impossible to hold. She opened her eyes and found him watching her. You gave him that. You gave him the skills to be a hero. She stood and walked to the bookshelf by the window. Behind the novels and military histories, hidden from casual view, was a door. She opened it and pulled out a wooden box. Inside were photographs. Dozens of them. Young faces in training gear, graduation ceremonies, deployment photos. Some smiling, some serious, some no longer alive. I keep them here, she said, so I do not forget. Ghost crossed the room and looked into the box. His hand trembled slightly as he lifted a photograph of a young man with his eyes. Marcus, he said softly. He was one of my best. Corinne's voice cracked. They all were. Amadi joined them at the bookshelf. She studied the faces, recognizing some, wondering about others. How many? 412 graduates over 15 years. Corinne touched the edge of the box. 19 did not come home. The number hung in the air. 19 faces that would never grow old. 19 families that would never be whole again. 19 weights she carried every single day. Ghost set down the photograph carefully. This is why you have to do this. Not for your reputation. Not for pride. For them. For every operator who trusted you to prepare them for the worst. Kellerman represents everything you fought against. If you let him win, you let them down. I know. Her phone buzzed again. This time she looked at it. A message from Commander Wentworth. He had a proposal. If she was willing, they could settle this on a grinder. In front of everyone. A formal demonstration of capability. The way disputes had been settled in naval special warfare for 60 years. She read the message twice. Then she typed her response. Tell me when and where. The answer came within seconds. Tomorrow. 0800. The whole community will be watching. Corinne set down the phone and looked at the box of photographs one last time. 19 faces who could not speak for themselves. 412 who could. She closed the box and slid it back behind the books. Tomorrow she would show them all who she was. Not for pride. Not for reputation. For them. That night, Corinne could not sleep. She lay in the darkness listening to Kwame breathe beside her, his presence steady and warm. He had not tried to talk her out of it. After 19 years, he knew better. But she had seen the worry in his eyes when he thought she was not looking. At 2 in the morning, she gave up on rest and slipped out of bed. The hallway was dark, the house silent except for the distant hum of the refrigerator. She made her way to the small office at the back of the house. The desk was cluttered with civilian things now. Bills, magazines, a half-finished crossword puzzle. But the filing cabinet in the corner still held the old files. Lesson plans, training protocols, notes from 15 years of shaping young operators into something extraordinary. She pulled out a folder at random and opened it. Her own handwriting stared back at her, neat and precise. Notes on teaching close-quarters combat, diagrams of joint locks and pressure points, margin notes about individual students and their weaknesses. She had written thousands of these pages, refined every technique through trial and error, watched young men fail and fail again until suddenly they did not fail anymore. That was the secret nobody understood. Training was not about making people strong. It was about teaching them that they were already strong, that the capability was inside them, waiting to be unlocked. Kellerman would never understand that. Men like him thought strength came from domination, from making others feel small so they could feel large. They confused fear with respect and cruelty with discipline. The door creaked behind her. Kwame stood in the doorway, wearing the old Navy t-shirt he slept in. "Could not sleep either," he said. "Too much thinking." He crossed the room and settled into the chair beside her desk. For a moment they sat in comfortable silence, two people who had learned to share space without filling it with words. "I fell in love with you because of what you could do," he said finally. "But that is not why I stayed." She looked at him. "I stayed because of who you are when you're not doing it." He reached over and took her hand. "The way you helped that young woman at the gala. The way you gave Kellerman every chance to walk away. The way you keep those photographs hidden because looking at them hurts too much. Kwame, you are the strongest person I know." He squeezed her hand. "Not because of what you can do to people, because of what you choose not to do." She felt tears prick at her eyes. She blinked them back. Tomorrow required clarity, not emotion. "I need to ask you something," she said. "Anything. If this goes wrong, if he finds a way to twist it, will you be all right?" Kwame's expression shifted. Confusion first, then understanding, then something that looked almost like offense. "You think I care about my career more than I care about you? I think the Navy is your life. I think you have worked for 30 years to get where you are. I do not want to be the reason that ends." He stood and pulled her to her feet. His hands cupped her face, forcing her to meet his eyes. "Listen to me. You are my life. The Navy is just what I do. If supporting my wife cost me a star, then I never deserved the star in the first place." She let herself lean into him, let herself be held. Tomorrow she would need to be the Master Chief again. Tonight she could just be Corinne. They stayed like that for a long moment. Then Kwame pulled back and looked at the files spread across her desk. "What are you looking for?" "I'm not sure." She gestured at the papers. "Reminding myself, I suppose, of who I used to be." He picked up one of the lesson plans and studied it. "This is your handwriting? From 15 years ago." He set it down carefully. "You do not need to remind yourself of anything. You never stopped being who you were. You just found a different way to be her." Her phone buzzed on the desk. A message from Amadi. "I talked to some of the operators who trained under you. They want to help. What do you need?" Corinne stared at the message. She had spent 3 years trying to disappear. 3 years building walls between herself and the community she had served. And now, when it mattered, they were reaching back for her. She typed her response. "I need you to find everyone Kellerman has wronged. There will be others. Men like him always leave a trail." The answer came quickly. "Already started. You would not believe what people are willing to say when they know someone is finally listening." Corinne showed the message to Kwame. His jaw tightened. "How many?" "We will find out." She set down the phone and looked at the files one more time. 15 years of work. Hundreds of students. Thousands of lessons taught and learned and passed on to the next generation. Tomorrow she would teach one more. She closed the folder and stood. "Come to bed. I need a rest." They walked back to the bedroom together, hand in hand. Outside, the Pacific Ocean rolled against the shore in the darkness, patient and eternal. In a few hours, the sun would rise. The grinder would fill with witnesses. and Corinne Vasquez-Adia would show them all that some lessons never fade. But for now, she let herself rest in the arms of the man who loved her. Not for what she could do, for who she was. That was enough. That had always been enough. The Bud-S grinder looked different at 07:30 in the morning. Corinne had stood on this sand hundreds of times. She had watched young men break here, watched them rebuild themselves into something harder and sharper. The concrete walls surrounding the courtyard had absorbed decades of sweat and pain and transformation. Today, those walls would witness something else entirely. She arrived early, dressed in simple PT gear. Navy blue shorts, gray t-shirt, running shoes that had seen better days. No insignia, no indication of rank or history. Just a 52-year-old woman who looked like she might be here for a morning jog. The crowd was already gathering. Word had spread through the community like wildfire. Active duty SEALs lined the edges of the grinder, some in uniform, some in civilian clothes. Retired operators stood in clusters, gray beards and weathered faces watching with knowing eyes. Instructors from Bud-S had paused their morning routines to observe. Even a group of candidates in the middle of training had been given permission to watch from a distance. Corinne scanned the faces. She recognized some of them. Students from years past, now senior operators with teams of their own. Men she had pushed to their limits and beyond. Men who had cursed her name during training and thanked her for it after. Ghost materialized beside her. "How are you feeling? Ready?" He nodded, his eyes moving across the crowd. Almaty found 17 formal complaints against Kellerman. Harassment, intimidation, abuse of authority, all of them suppressed or discouraged by the chain of command. 17, that we know of. Ghost's voice was grim. There are probably more who never came forward. Corinne absorbed the number. 17 people whose careers and well-being had been damaged by a man who was supposed to be their leader. I requested it. A flicker of respect crossed his face. Senior Chief Kellerman will be here shortly. I want to be clear about the rules. This is a formal demonstration of instructor capability. 3 phases. Teaching, technical skills, physical application, no injuries, no cheap shots, clean and professional. Understood. Wentworth hesitated. I should tell you something. I have read your file. The classified sections. Corinne met his eyes, but said nothing. I am not worried about you, he said quietly. I'm almost worried about him. He walked away to confer with the other officials. Corinne turned back to the grinder and let her eyes move across the sand. So many memories embedded in this place. So many young men who had become something more than they thought possible. A murmur rippled through the crowd. She turned to see Kellerman approaching. He looked different than he had at the gala. The dress uniform was gone, replaced by PT gear that showed off arms thick with muscle. He moved with the confidence of an athlete in his prime, rolling his shoulders, bouncing on his toes. A predator preparing for the hunt. His entourage followed. The female chief from the gala. A few younger operators who had not yet learned to read the room. They positioned themselves at the edge of the grinder, a visible show of support. Kellerman's eyes found Corinne across the sand. He smiled, the smile of a man who believed he had already won. She did not smile back. Kwame appeared at her side, dressed in civilian clothes. He could not be here in uniform. The optics would be wrong, but nothing could keep him away entirely. Last chance to walk away, he said softly. Was that ever really an option? No. He touched her hand briefly. I just wanted you to know you had it. The crowd had grown. Corinne estimated 300 people now, maybe more. Faces pressed against every available vantage point. Camera phones held discreetly despite the official prohibition on recording. Commander Wentworth stepped to the center of the grinder and raised his hand. The murmuring stopped. We are here to resolve a dispute regarding instructor qualifications. He spoke loudly enough for everyone to hear. Senior Chief Petty Officer Bryce Kellerman has publicly questioned the credentials of Master Chief, retired Corinne Vasquez-Adia. This demonstration will settle the matter. He turned to face both of them. Senior Chief Kellerman. Master Chief Vasquez-Adia. Do you both consent to this demonstration? Kellerman's voice rang out confidently. I do. Corinne's voice was quieter, but carried just as far. I do. Wentworth nodded. Then let us begin. The crowd fell silent. 300 people holding their breath. The morning sun cast long shadows across the sand. Somewhere in the distance, a helicopter thumped its way across the sky. Corinne looked at Kellerman across the grinder. 34 years old. Peak physical condition. 12 years of combat experience. Every advantage that mattered on paper. She was 52, retired for 3 years. Gray in her hair and aches in her joints that never quite went away. But paper did not fight. People did. And she had spent her entire life learning the difference between strength and capability. Kellerman cracked his knuckles and rolled his neck. Corinne stood perfectly still, her hands loose at her sides, her breathing slow and even. In 28 years of service, she had never lost on this sand. She did not intend to start today. Phase 1, Commander Wentworth announced. Instruction. Both participants will teach a basic close-quarters combat technique to a volunteer. Effectiveness of instruction will be evaluated by the candidate's ability to perform the technique. A young Bud-esque candidate stepped forward. Third phase, maybe 23 years old. Nervous energy radiating off him in waves. He had no idea he was about to become part of naval special warfare history. Senior Chief Kellerman, you will instruct first. Kellerman stepped forward with the confidence of a man who had done this 1,000 times. He positioned the candidate in front of him and began demonstrating a basic wrist escape. His technique was correct. Corinne could not fault the mechanics. But his delivery was something else entirely. No, not like that. Are you stupid? Kellerman grabbed the candidate's arm and wrenched it into position. Like this. Pay attention. The candidate flinched. His movements became tighter, more hesitant. Fear was replacing focus. Again, Kellerman's voice dripped with contempt. My grandmother could do this better, and she is dead. Nervous laughter from Kellerman's supporters. Uncomfortable silence from the rest of the crowd. The candidate attempted the technique 3 more times. Each attempt was worse than the last. Kellerman's criticism grew sharper, more personal. By the end, the young man's hands were shaking. Time, Wentworth called. He made a note on his tablet. Master Chief Vasquez-Aduya, your turn. Corinne stepped forward. The candidate looked at her with barely concealed dread. Another instructor about to tear him apart. She smiled at him. What is your name? Seman Reyes, Mom. Reyes. She kept her voice calm and warm. Forget everything that just happened. Take a breath. He blinked, surprised. Then he took a breath. Good. Now, this technique is not about strength. It is about physics. She positioned herself beside him rather than in front of him. Watch my hands. See how I rotate against the thumb? That is the weakest point of any grip. You're not fighting muscle. You're finding the gap. She demonstrated slowly, narrating each movement. Then she had him try. His first attempt was clumsy. She adjusted his angle with a gentle touch. Better. Feel how that changes the leverage? He tried again. This time the technique worked. His eyes widened. I did it. You did. Now do it again until your body remembers. By the end of her allotted time, Reyes was executing the technique smoothly and confidently. The fear had left his posture. Something like pride had taken its place. Time, Wentworth called. He made another note, his expression neutral, but his eyes thoughtful. The crowd had shifted. Corinne could feel the change in energy. Kellerman's supporters looked less certain. The older operators were nodding to each other. They recognized what they had just witnessed. Not just technique. Teaching. Phase 2, Wentworth announced. Technical proficiency. Both participants will field strip and reassemble an unfamiliar foreign weapon system. Time and accuracy will be evaluated. A table had been set up at the edge of the grinder. On it sat 2 identical weapons. Corinne recognized them immediately. QBZ-95, Chinese bullpup rifle, not standard in any American armory. A test of adaptability as much as skill. Kellerman went first. His hands moved with practiced speed, breaking down the weapon into its component parts. He was fast, very fast. Reassembly took slightly longer, his fingers searching for unfamiliar catches and pins, but he completed it in under 2 minutes. He stepped back with a satisfied smirk. Beat that, Grandma. Corinne approached the table. She picked up the rifle and felt its weight, its balance. Her hands began moving. She was faster. Not by much, but noticeably. The weapon came apart in her hands like she had built it herself. Reassembly was even quicker, her fingers finding the catches without hesitation. But she did not step back when she finished. Instead, she held up the weapon and addressed Commander Wentworth. Sir, this weapon has been deliberately sabotaged. The firing pin has been installed backwards. If someone attempted to fire this rifle, it would misfire and potentially injure the shooter. Silence. Absolute silence. Wentworth stepped forward and took the weapon. He examined it for a long moment. Then he looked at Kellerman's rifle. Then back at Corinne. You're correct, he said. Both weapons were modified identically. You're the only one who noticed. Kellerman's face went red. That is not fair. Nobody said anything about checking for sabotage. Nobody had to say it. Corinne's voice was calm. An instructor's job is not just to perform a technique. It is to recognize danger. If you had handed that weapon to a student, you could have killed them. The murmur that ran through the crowd was not kind to Kellerman. A voice rang out from somewhere in the audience. She taught me that in 2017. Always check your work. Another voice. She taught me in 2014. In another. 2019. She failed me 3 times for missing that exact thing. The recognition rippled through the crowd like a wave. Corinne felt it wash over her. 15 years of students. 15 years of lessons. All of them here, remembering. Kellerman stood alone on the sand, his smirk gone, his confidence cracking. Phase 3, Wentworth announced. Physical demonstration. This was what Kellerman had been waiting for. This was where size and strength would finally matter. This was where he would prove that an old woman had no business challenging a combat-decorated SEAL. He stepped onto the sand and dropped into a fighting stance. Corinne watched him for a moment. Then she stepped forward to meet him. The crowd held its breath. 300 witnesses. 1 demonstration. And a lesson that Bryce Kellerman would never forget. Kellerman came in fast. He had 30 pounds of muscle and 20 years of youth. His first strike was textbook perfect, a right cross designed to end fights before they started. Against most opponents, it would have worked. Corinne was not most opponents. She moved offline, a quarter step that took her out of the strike's path while keeping her balanced. Her hand guided his arm past her, redirecting his momentum. He stumbled forward, overcorrected, and found himself facing the wrong direction. The crowd murmured. Kellerman spun and attacked again. A combination this time. Jab, cross, hook. Fast and powerful. The kind of assault that overwhelmed through sheer aggression. Corinne did not block. She did not retreat. She simply was not where his fists were landing. Each strike met empty air. Each movement left him more extended, more off balance. She was not fighting him. She was conducting a clinic. She caught his wrist on the 4th punch and applied a joint lock so smoothly that he was on his knees before he understood what happened. She held him there for exactly 2 seconds, then released and stepped back. That is called redirection, she said, her voice carrying across the silent grinder. When your opponent commits to power, you use their momentum against them. Strength becomes weakness. Kellerman surged to his feet, his face twisted with rage. He charged, abandoning technique for pure aggression. Corinne sidestepped, hooked his ankle, and guided him face first into the sand. She did not strike him. She did not need to. His own force did all the work. That is called using the environment. She circled slowly as he pushed himself up. Sand in the eyes. Uneven footing. An intelligent fighter uses everything available. The crowd was no longer murmuring. They were watching in absolute silence, witnessing something they would tell their grandchildren about. Kellerman rose more slowly this time. Sand clung to his shirt, his face. The confidence was gone from his eyes. In its place was something she recognized. The dawning horror of a man realizing he was completely outclassed. He threw a desperate haymaker. She ducked under it, came up inside his guard, and applied pressure to a nerve cluster in his shoulder. His arm went dead. She released before any damage was done. That is pain compliance. She stepped back again. Control without injury. An instructor's most important skill. From somewhere in the crowd, a voice called out. She taught me that in 2016. Another voice. She failed me 6 times before I got it right. And another. That exact technique saved my life in Kandahar. The recognition was spreading now, rippling through the assembled operators like a wave. Corinne heard her own lessons echoing back at her from dozens of throats. 15 years of teaching, alive in the bodies and memories of the men and women she had trained. Kellerman stood in the center of the grinder, breathing hard, his dead arm hanging at his side. He looked around at the faces watching him. Looked for support. Found none. Even his entourage had gone quiet. The female chief was staring at the ground. The younger operators had stepped back, putting distance between themselves and their senior chief. Enough. Commander Wentworth stepped forward, his voice cutting through the tension. This demonstration is concluded. He turned to face the crowd, but his words were clearly meant for Kellerman. In preparation for today, we reviewed Senior Chief Kellerman's instructor evaluations from the past 3 years. He held up a tablet. We also received 17 formal complaints that were previously suppressed or discouraged. Harassment, intimidation, abuse of authority. The silence somehow grew deeper. Senior Chief Kellerman, you are relieved of instructor duties pending full investigation. Wentworth's voice was iron. Report to the commanding officers building immediately. Kellerman's face cycled through shock, denial, and finally rage. He turned toward Corinne, his working hand clenched into a fist. This is not over, he spat. You think you could destroy my career because of some old reputation? I have combat medals. I have real experience. You are nothing but a retired training dummy. Corinne stepped close to him, close enough that only he could hear her words. This was never about destroying your career. She held his eyes. This was about stopping you from destroying anyone else. Every student you terrorized, every complaint that got buried, every young operator who learned that abuse was acceptable because you got away with it. She stepped back. You're not a warrior, Senior Chief. You're a bully with a uniform, and your classroom is closed. She turned and walked away. Behind her, she heard Wentworth directing Shore Patrol to escort Kellerman from the grinder. She heard the crowd beginning to breathe again, conversations starting in hushed voices. Ghost fell in a step beside her. You could have heard him, he said quietly. Yes. Why did you not? Because pain was never the point. She looked at him. The point was the lesson, and I think he finally learned it. Kwame was waiting at the edge of the grinder. His eyes were bright with pride and something that looked like relief. He did not speak. He simply opened his arms. She walked into them and let herself be held. Around them, 300 witnesses began to understand what they had seen. Not a fight, a masterclass. The week that followed felt like a dream. Corinne's phone never stopped buzzing. Messages from former students she had not heard from in years. Interview requests from military publications. Invitations to speak at training commands across the country. She declined them all. What she could not decline was the knock on her door on Thursday afternoon. Lieutenant Commander Amati stood on the porch with a laptop tucked under her arm and a look on her face that suggested she was not leaving without being heard. You need to see something, she said. They sat in the living room, Kwame joining them with coffee that no one touched. Amati opened the laptop and turned the screen toward Corinne. We collected these over the past week. Video testimonials from operators who trained under you. I was going to save them for the grinder, but there were too many. They're still coming in. She pressed play. The first face was a Master Chief from Team 3. Gray beard, tired eyes, the look of a man who had seen too much and kept going anyway. Master Chief Vesquezadilla taught me that strength is not about what you can do to someone. It is about what you choose not to do. I have carried that lesson through 6 deployments and 22 years of service. I am alive because of her. The video changed. A younger operator, maybe 30, speaking for what looked like a forward operating base somewhere sandy and hot. She failed me 4 times on the same technique. 4 times. I was ready to quit. But she pulled me aside and said failure is not the opposite of success. It is the path to it. I passed on my 5th attempt. Last year I used that technique to save 2 members of my team. Another face. Another story. A female officer speaking from a Navy ship. When I started the program, half the instructors did not think I belonged there. Master Chief Vasquez-Odia never treated me any different than anyone else. She held me to the same standard and expected me to meet it. I did, because she believed I could before I believed it myself. The testimonials kept coming. Dozens of them. Operators from every team, every deployment, every era of her 15-year tenure. Some spoke about specific techniques that had saved their lives. Others spoke about lessons that had nothing to do with combat. Patience. Discipline. The difference between being feared and being respected. Corinne watched in silence, her hands folded in her lap. Kwame's hand found hers somewhere around the 10th video. She held on tight. The final testimonial was Ghost. He sat in what looked like his living room, his son's photograph visible on the shelf behind him. His voice was steady, but his eyes were wet. My son Marcus trained under Corinne Vasquez-Odia. He did not make it back from his third deployment. But before he died, he held a position for 6 hours against impossible odds. He saved 4 men who are still serving today. He did that because of what she taught him. She paused, and even through the screen Corinne could see him struggling. My son died a hero, and I will spend the rest of my life being grateful to the woman who gave him the tools to become one. The screen went dark. Amadi closed the laptop gently. There are 47 more, from bases around the world. Some of them are classified, so we cannot share them publicly. But they exist. They're the record of what you built. Corinne did not trust her voice. She nodded instead. Kwame spoke for her. What happens now? With Kellerman? The investigation is ongoing. Amadi's voice shifted to something harder. The 17 complaints have become 23. More people are coming forward now that they know someone will actually listen. He is facing court-martial for conduct unbecoming and abuse of authority. His career is over. Good, Kwame said. Corinne finally found her voice. What about the ones who protected him? The chain of command that buried those complaints? Being addressed. Amadi met her eyes. Commander Wentworth is personally reviewing the failures. There will be accountability. The words hung in the air. Accountability. Such a simple concept. So rarely achieved. There's something else. Amadi reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. Commander Wentworth asked me to give you this. Corinne opened the folder. Inside was a formal letter on Naval Special Warfare Command letterhead. They want me to consult on the new instructor selection criteria, she said. Not just consult. Amadi smiled for the first time. They want you to help redesign the entire program. Your protocols are already the foundation. They want to make sure no one like Kellerman ever makes it into a classroom again. Corinne read the letter twice. The words blurred slightly. She blinked, and the blur became tears she could not stop. Kwame's arm came around her shoulders. You spent 3 years trying to disappear, he said softly. Maybe it is time to stop hiding. She looked at the laptop where 47 testimonials waited, at the letter in her hands, at the husband who had loved her through all of it. I'm not sure I know how to do this anymore, she admitted. You never forgot. Amadi stood and gathered her things. You just needed someone to remind you. She left them alone in the living room, the afternoon light slanting through the windows, the weight of 15 years of service finally feeling like something other than burden. It felt like purpose. It felt like coming home. 3 months later, the changes were becoming visible. Corinne stood at the back of a classroom at Naval Special Warfare Advanced Training Command, watching a new generation of instructors learn how to teach. The curriculum had been rewritten. The selection criteria had been redesigned. Every protocol now carried her fingerprints, even if her name appeared nowhere in the official documents. She preferred it that way. Commander Wentworth had offered her a formal position. She had declined. What she wanted was influence without visibility, the ability to shape the program without becoming the face of it. He had understood, because good leaders always understood that some people serve best from the shadows. The instructor at the front of the room was struggling. A young woman, maybe 28, tried to explain a joint lock to a classroom of skeptical male operators. Corinne recognized the doubt in their posture, the subtle dismissiveness that women in this world learn to navigate or be destroyed by. She caught the young instructor's eye and gave her a small nod. The instructor straightened. She called one of the largest men in the room to the front, demonstrated the technique on him with perfect precision, put him on the ground so smoothly that he laughed in surprise. The skepticism in the room evaporated. Corinne smiled and slipped out the door. Outside, the Coronado sun was warm on her face. She walked past the Budez compound, past the grinder where everything had changed, past the beaches where young men were currently learning that they were capable of more than they ever imagined. Her phone buzzed. A message from Maya Thornton, the young spouse she had helped at the NEX a lifetime ago. Ethan graduated Budez today. He said to tell you thank you. You were the first person who made me feel like I belonged here. Corinne typed back a simple response. Congratulations to you both. You belonged here all along. She pocketed the phone and kept walking. The gala was tonight. 1 year since the confrontation that had changed everything. The Navy Special Warfare Foundation had invited her as a guest of honor. She had tried to decline. Kwame had insisted. You spend your whole career being invisible, he had said. Maybe it is time to let people see you. She was still not sure he was right, but she had learned to trust him on matters of her own well-being. He saw things she could not. That evening, she stood in front of the mirror in the same navy dress she had worn a year ago. The strap that Kellerman had grabbed had been repaired so perfectly that no one would ever know it had been torn. She knew. That was enough. Kwame appeared behind her, handsome in his dress blues. He met her eyes in the mirror. Ready? No. She smiled. But I'm going anyway. The Silver Strand Club was more crowded than she remembered. The same crystal chandeliers. The same string quartet. But the faces that turned toward her as she entered were different now. They knew who she was. They parted to let her pass. They nodded with respect that she had spent 3 years trying to avoid. She found she did not mind anymore. Ghost was waiting by the bar, a glass of water in his hand. He looked better than he had a year ago. Some of the weight had lifted from his eyes. Master Chief, Vincent. They stood in comfortable silence, watching the crowd. Operators in dress uniforms. Spouses in evening wear. Donors and dignitaries and people who would never understand what it cost to serve. I visited Marcus last week, Ghost said quietly. Told her what you did, what you're still doing. Corinne did not ask where Marcus was buried. She already knew. She had been there herself, more times than she could count. He would be proud, Ghost continued, not of the demonstration, of what came after, the changes you were making, the instructors you were shaping. He paused. You're still teaching, just a different classroom. A young operator approached with his wife. Corinne recognized him from the testimonial videos. Team 4, 2 deployments. Master Chief, I just wanted to say thank you. He extended his hand. You saved my life in ways I cannot even explain to my family. She shook his hand. You saved yourself. I just showed you where to look. He moved on, replaced by another face, another handshake, another story of survival and gratitude. The line seemed endless. 15 years of students coming to pay their respects. Kwame appeared at her side with 2 glasses of sparkling water. He handed her one and surveyed the crowd. Popular tonight. It appears so. How does it feel? She considered the question. A year ago, she would have said overwhelming. Suffocating. Wrong. Tonight it felt different. Like I finally stopped running for myself. He clinked his glass against hers. About time. Across the room, she spotted a young senior chief getting too loud with a server. Old patterns. Familiar behavior. Her body tensed automatically, ready to intervene. Then she caught his eye, just held his gaze. He read something there. Recognition. Warning. The weight of a reputation that preceded her everywhere now. He moderated immediately, nodding an apology to the server, stepping back. She did not have to do anything. Her presence was the lesson now. Ghost noticed the exchange and raised his glass. Still teaching. Always. The string quartet shifted to something softer. Couples moved toward the dance floor. Kwame extended his hand. Dance with me. She took it. They moved together under the crystal chandeliers, surrounded by the community she had served for 28 years. The community she had tried to leave. The community that had pulled her back. If you enjoyed this story, drop a comment and let us know what resonated most. Maybe you have known someone whose quiet exterior hid extraordinary capability. Or maybe you have been underestimated yourself, and you are still waiting for your moment to show them who you really are. As they danced, Corinne let herself remember all of it. The training, the students, the ones she lost, and the ones who came home. The 15 years of lessons, and the 3 years of silence, and the single night that had brought it all back. She was not hiding anymore. She was not running. She was simply present in this moment, in this life she had built from service and sacrifice and love. Kwame pulled her closer. "What are you thinking? That I'm exactly where I am supposed to be." The music swelled. The crowd moved around them. And Master Chief Corinne Vasquezadilla, retired, finally let herself be seen. Not for what she could do, for who she was. And that had always been enough.